Welcome, everyone. This is the special meeting of July 1st, 2020 of the East Baton School Board. Let me mute my sound. There we go. I'm going to give a reading note in the public. This notice is to the East Baton Rouge Parish get certification gubernatorial JB 2020-30 and board member participation by telephone or video conference as it relates to school board meetings. Please be advised that to the public emergency caused by the coronavirus 2019 COVID-19 and stay-at-home orders issued by President Trump and Governor Edwards, the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board may, for the duration of this emergency, conduct board meetings and committee meetings electronically via telephone and/or video conference. Due to a specific concern related to a potential infection at the previous meeting, the special meeting scheduled for July 1st, 2020 at 5 p.m. will be streamed live via Microsoft Teams events. A link to watch this meeting can be found on board docs located on the school board website. For written public comment will be provided before the meeting as well as before each action is taken by the board on an action item. Individuals wishing to make a public comment about any of the posted items will need to click on the agenda item in board docs and submit via the highlighted public comment hyperlink on the agenda item details. Upon the closing of the comments, the board president will read into the record the public comments that have been submitted. Mr. Shamlin, would you like to give any other instructions?
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry, guys, I was muted. Board President Gode did ask about the necessity of reading public comments. The board has been given a wide latitude under the special order to allow the public to comment as necessary. We've chosen to do that online using a written comment system. However, we can, in the interest of efficiency, impose a few restrictions. We've chosen today to say that we will only read into the record those comments that are relevant to this specific topic. And we will also be certain to make sure those are read in. State law requires us to always allow the public access or full access as much as we can. But under this particular situation, due to the fact that we're streaming, that we're working virtually, and that we are trying to work as efficiently as possible, we're going to move ahead with the reading comments that are relevant to the topic. Also, if comments contain profanity or obscenities, those will be exempted from being read in. All comments will be available for public consumption via public records request as is usual.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry when I was saying you didn't have your mic on. It was my issue that I didn't have my speaker on. Sorry about that. So now the meeting will be called to order. The invocation by Vice President Jamel Howard and the Pledge of Allegiance led by myself. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, President Gode. If you would please bow your heads. Most gracious Father, we thank you for this moment. We thank you for this opportunity to do the business of our people, the people of this great district. Father God, we ask that everyone approaches this meeting with a clear mind, a clear heart, and we just ask that you continue to give us the strength to do what's best for students and the best interest of students of this district. We thank you for safe travels for those who have traveled near and far, and we just give you all the glory, honor, and praise for all the things you continue to do for us in this school district. Thank you and amen.
Thank you, Vice President Howard. We will now say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. So now we will do the roll call. Madam Secretary.
District 7, President Gode.
Here.
District 3, Vice President Howard.
Present.
District 1, Mr. Blue.
Here.
District 2, Mr. Lannis.
Present.
District 4, Ms. Collins.
Present.
District 5, Ms. Ware Jackson. Ms. Ware Jackson. District 6, Ms. Dyson.
Present.
District 8, Ms. Bernard. Ms. Bernard.
Present.
District 9, Mr. Tatman.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. The first item on the agenda and the only item on the agenda is discussion and consideration of the superintendent contract and related matters. Mr. Shamlin, would you like to give any introduction?
Yes, I'll just be brief. We did revise the contract only in terms of correcting a few pronouns and other issues today, but the substantive nature of the contract has remained in effect since the board received it on Monday. We spent this weekend, myself and board leadership, negotiating with counsel for proposed superintendent Leslie Brown, and we were able to come to terms on Sunday evening. I spent a greater part of Sunday evening and Monday drafting and attempting to get this to the board for review. The contract aligns with state law and many of the requirements of state law, much of it stated throughout the contract, but also in statute. I can discuss that as needed via questions. The contract as it stands has all of the requirements in it. I will say this, there's one exception with regard to performance targets and objectives. And Mrs. Goldie, if you don't mind, I'll just jump ahead on that. I had a conversation today with the State Department and with State Superintendent Kay Brumley to let him know that we would not be including performance targets for the first year of this contract, primarily due to the fact that our district is in the process of reopening, and we were unsure about how to proceed with targets that would be fair to both the superintendent and also effective and necessary for the district. And so I got an okay from the State Department that would be just fine. If you read the contract in detail, it requires the superintendent and the board to convene at specific times in the coming year to create performance targets for the year 2 and 3 of the contract. I want to make sure everyone got that up front. Even though that's a statutory requirement, we did receive permission from the department to move ahead, and I hope that alleviates any questions around the performance targets. The rest of the contract is pretty straightforward. It lists everything from salary to requirements around obligations related to both the board and the superintendent. I'll turn it over to Mr. Goldie and the board. If you guys have questions, I'll do the best I can to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Shamlin. I will now entertain a motion. Moved by Ms. Dyson. Do I have a second? I'm sorry, moved by Ms. Dyson, seconded by Mr. Tatman. The board is open. Would anyone like to speak?
Mr. Howard.
Thank you, April. Thank you, President Gode. Thank you, Mr. Shamlin, for your work, excuse me, throughout the negotiation process. I do have a couple of areas of concern that I would like to get cleared up and get some clarity around. The first area of concern will be around the minimum or the base salary. I know that in our original negotiation conversations that I was a part of, we discussed that there was a range that the median salary was around $230 and our number was around $230 to $250. If anyone can clarify where did we get to the $255 number, that would be helpful. First question, and then I'll move on to the second question if you guys can engage that.
I have to go back and look at my notes. The part of that came about removing the performance targets for the year, which took $10,000 off.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gode. I'm having a hard time hearing you. Your internet is going in and out, so
Is this better?
It's a little blurred. I don't know if anyone else is having trouble hearing, but I am.
I'm trying. Is this better?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. In negotiating the contract, we ended up taking off the $10,000 potential for a bonus in the first year and remove that. And there were several other minor changes in the contract. And so out of the spirit of compromise, we went to the 255. Now I'm not hearing you.
I'm muted. It's not an internet issue. I was muted. So I just want to go on the record of saying that if we know that the median salary for a superintendent of a district our size within our district is $230,000 for base salary, I think that we should be closer around that number. I understand the process of negotiation, but I do believe that we bring in a superintendent who can give us an opportunity to see their work, and then we reward them in compensation. So I believe that the base number is fairly high, and so I would hope that on the record that we know that I as a board member would like for us to see if that's a possibility, to get that number closer toward the median average as opposed to a 25,000 increase already from the beginning. And I understand the negotiation tactics. My second question or concern is around the car allowance and the technology allowance. I believe that the car allowance is a bit much considering where we are as a district financially and knowing just the times that we find ourselves in as a community and as a district. I'm not sure that it's a necessary piece. I understand that it was included in Mr. Drake's contract, but I personally don't believe that us allowing or having a car allowance is a necessity when we're already paying a base salary of $250,000. We'll love to engage on that matter, but just want to know for the record that I don't believe that that's a necessary piece. And my last piece, one of the last two pieces is the technology piece. We already give our employees around the district, they receive Chromebooks or they receive whatever device just like us as board members, as well as provide internet access. So I don't know why we also include in this contract a technology allowance, which is also was included in Mr. Drake's contract, but I still didn't agree with it then, and I don't think that it's something that we continue as a practice within our district, again, with the financial situation that we find ourselves in, as well as the state of our finances as a district. And then the last thing, I understand the performance metrics will be taken out for year one in relation to what's going on with COVID and all of those things, but I just wanted to lift up that I think that there has to be a very intentional action by us as a board to lift up performance metrics that actually move our district forward, specifically talking about like how we're performing in our underperforming schools and how we increasing graduation rates. And when I speak on graduation rates, I'm not talking about an aggregate data piece. I'm talking about breaking down those data pieces into subgroups to ensure that we are providing a quality education for every single student and subgroup within our district. So those are my concerns that I will lift up, and I look forward to discussion going forward. Thank you.
So let me try to answer some of those issues. First, I'll take them in reverse order. On the performance objectives, I 100% agree. And we really want to have significant performance objectives that are measurable. And that's why we're not doing them in the first year, because we don't know exactly what we will be facing, and we don't know what the baseline is going to be. And so we will work together as a board to come up with those objectives. On the second item around the technology, that is a significant reduction from the number that Mr. Drake had, and that is to cover cell phone and internet access, which we do not provide for all employees of the district. The superintendent is on call 24 hours a day, and so that is to ensure proper communication for the superintendent throughout the entire time frame in the day, and to provide for them to have cell phones and internet connections. On the automobile allowance, again, that is a significant reduction from what Mr. Drake had, but in the policy, the superintendent could sit and be able to claim travel for all of the intra-parish travel that is being done. And this was an attempt to not have the work burden of all the documentation fall upon the superintendent and the staff to be able to pull all that together to be able to reimburse it. So instead of having that burden on the staff for documentation and reporting, we thought it was better to go with the single one lump sum, and so no additional reimbursement may be claimed by the superintendent. Again, both of these numbers are significant reductions from where the contract had Mr. Drake's values. Mr. Lannis?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yes. So first, I'll say I agree with Vice President Howard that the allowances at this point I think are a bit questionable at this stage, considering where we are in our district. The next thing I want to ask is how soon are we going to move on those measurable objectives for the performance metrics? That's not something I think that we should be waiting 1 year to start discussing. I think that's something that we should be discussing, if not within the next month or two, definitely within the next 3 months. And I just want to get some clarification around that.
I will give you my interpretation, but it's up to the board. Being right now, we just don't know which school will look like in the fall. We don't know if it's going to be school, in-class school, or combination
I'm
of the
sorry,
two.
can't hear you. Your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. That's better.
Okay. I don't know what school will look like in the fall, and we don't know what testing will be available, so we don't know what metrics will be valid. And so this is not an intent not to have performance metrics. It's just we don't know what they should be right now. And as soon as there's some clarity on that, Ms. Brown wants the performance objectives, we want performance objectives. So as soon as there's some clarity on what those could be, we will certainly work on those. It's not an attempt not to have them. We just don't know what to have right now.
That's completely understandable. I just think that in the time that we have allotted towards us right now, I think we could be working on that now. I think that even if we implemented a year, can you hear me? I'm sorry. Can y'all hear me? Okay. I think even if we're talking about adding them a year from now, we can still at least make sure we do our due diligence to make sure that we are working on what we want those things to look like now. Because what we do know is we know how many underperforming schools that we currently have. We know exactly what the problem is in terms of resources that are being provided to those schools and academic programming that needs to be added to several different schools. I think those are the types of things we can start talking about now on the front end and being proactive rather than waiting on the back end. And if we have to next summer, we can add in any additional framework to those measurable objectives.
I will just add the areas that we have discussed as potential performance needs to turn down their volume. I'm getting an echo. The ones that we've suggested as potential numbers was 3rd through 8th grade reading scores, 3rd through 8th grade math scores, graduation rates, completion of a strategic plan, and then the beginning of the process of creating an equity-based budget that is balanced. So those are the concepts that we've talked about with Mrs. Brown, but right now we just don't know how to put the framework around those. For instance, we don't even know if there's going to be testing next year to be able to do the 3rd grade and 3rd through 8th grade reading scores. So fully agree. I'm all for metrics. I'm all for putting them in. I just don't know what we should put in right now.
Let me speak for just a second to Mr. Lannis. The contract is actually drafted to say no later than a certain date these things would be developed. So I agree with you. If it is the pleasure of the board, the members of the board, as soon as the superintendent is seated and comfortable, y'all can begin discussing your ideas about what those expectations are going to be for next year. For example, a strategic plan is something we've talked about. Even though it may not be set until next year, that work can begin as soon as, October, November. So even though you have that concern, I want you to know the contract doesn't prohibit us starting earlier on any of these. It just says no later than. So it puts an absolute dead time or last date for things to begin happening. Okay.
Not a problem at all. The only thing I would ask and push towards is that when we are having these conversations, that it is open to the public so that they understand that accountability and transparency are at the forefront of all of these conversations moving forward.
Ms. Collins.
Yeah, my concern around the performance review, taking into account everything that everyone has said, is there are certain aspects that we do know are not going to change, you know, the way the superintendent engages community. I mean, it might have to be virtual versus in person across the district at different school sites or whatever that might look like due to coronavirus. But there are certain aspects of how we, you know, those things that we review in our superintendent that are not going to be that much different. And so at the very least, perhaps we could have that in place. While also working on those other factors that will have to be developed and changed due to the coronavirus, et cetera. With the travel cost piece, and I'll just be straight up and upfront. Me and my little liberal heart, the first time I read our outgoing superintendent's contract, I was a bit appalled because you think about what teachers get. And then, you know, it's the same conversation people have about CEOs or what have you of any organization versus the people doing the work on the ground. I had not until today heard the piece about the travel and the car allowance. That does actually make a lot of sense, but I'm curious, not so much around how much paperwork, although that is, it would be quite significant. However, what I'm concerned about is, you know, can we do a cost comparison? You know, assuming that the paperwork did have to get done for travel reimbursement, then what would that add up to approximately? Because any day of the week is different for a superintendent, but could we possibly get something like that, some information like that, or at the time that policy was put in place in a contract, travel, you know, travel expenses versus travel reimbursement, did those numbers get thrown around? Do we have access to those numbers in the past on what that cost might look like? Because I think that's the bigger concern, more so than the amount of paperwork, which would be significant. I think the bigger concern in terms of taxpayer dollars is, okay, if we went back to a travel reimbursement versus a car allowance, then what would the cost difference be? And so my question is, does anyone have any inkling of what the answer would be?
Right now, I have no idea. I do want to point out that cost also includes insurance, with the board being named as one of the insurers on that. So that's probably at least $1,500 a year. And so when you add that and you do was it 50 cents a mile today? I mean, it's not outrageous. And the differences in costs are going to be minimal, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, and I imagine so, but it just would have been helpful to the discussion. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Ware Jackson. We cannot hear you, ma'am.
No.
We got you.
Oh, you got me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Okay. Well, some of my concerns have been expressed. First, the starting salary of $255. I know we keep bringing up Drake's contract, but there were some things that were done in Drake's contract that we did over the years. Some of us anyway regret. Some of us got beat up a whole lot about that contract being so high to start with, and now we're starting even higher, as if we're just picking up where Drake's contract left off, which I don't think is a fair thing to do. the car allowance and all of that, I'm like, if you're gonna make $250,000 a year, I think you ought to be able to pay for your own vehicle. I don't know why we do that with a salary set the way that it is. Maybe a long time ago, there was a good reason for doing that kind of thing, but I don't know why we would still do that, and especially with a salary this significant. And as far as the, I'm looking at under compensation of superintendent, C, the annual performance pay. It says the superintendent shall be paid up to $10,000 based on meeting or exceeding the performance objectives. Aren't you paid to meet your performance objectives in your salary? You would think that a bonus would be something that's above and beyond your performance. So I question why we would be paying this if you're just meeting your what you're expected to do. So those are my main concerns. The the cell phone and the technology piece, I think is something that is affordable, that by the normal worker. And I understand this is the superintendent, but it's still an employee of EBR, and I would just like to see if there's some more trimming that we can do, because starting out at 255 is a bit high, I would think. I think we started off last time at around 230, 225, something like that, and moved up. So those are my concerns.
Let me address a couple of them for you. One is, in comparing to Mr. Drake's salary, you need to be very careful because Mr. Drake.
We don't want to compare Drake's salary. Why do we have to compare to Drake's salary?
I have the floor. Thank you. Mr. Drake's salary included payment of Mr. Drake of all the money that was going into the retirement plan since he was already retired. So if you look at the dollars going to them, this is a significant reduction for Mr. Drake's salaries. And it is in comparison to the salaries of other areas. And on the things around technology and everything else, that's your calls, guys. If you don't like it, we can start the year without a superintendent. So I think Mr. Shamlin and I did the best job we could, and that's the contract we've come up with. And you guys vote. Mr. Lannis.
Yes. I'm a bit perplexed right now. And the reason is because I feel like the board members are being attacked because they're raising very valuable points around a very pressing issue. These questions came up several times throughout the term of current Superintendent Drake's contract, where people talked about the allowance. So now that we are in a public meeting, the last thing we should be doing is beating up on other board members for raising these types of concerns, because these concerns come from our constituents. They come from the people that we serve. These are things that are not whispered about, they're talked about all the time. And I just think that it is, let me be clear, I think it is very disrespectful to say that if we don't like it, then we can start the year off without a superintendent. That is, I think, is uncalled for. And I think that it's really going to stagger these types of conversations moving forward if that's the way that we're going to handle and treat each other for raising very valuable concerns that our constituents are coming to us and saying, we have questions about these. That's our job, is to come to our board leadership and to come together as a board and say, this is what the community is asking for. These are their concerns. And these are also concerns that we have. We have said already and addressed and said that we have budgetary issues. We do. And I think it is valuable to add to this conversation that those concerns around allowances, basically meaning something that we're adding as an incentive for somebody that has not done any work yet, that is very, very, I think that's a questionable thing that we can bring up in this conversation. That doesn't mean that we won't move forward in the contract. That only means that we have questions concerning that need to be answered before we approve.
I hear you, Mr. Lamb, and I accept that the contract was negotiated by the leadership. I hear you, and I accept that the contract was negotiated by board leadership, and all of these items had the opportunity to be discussed with the board leadership when it was coming up. And so these were discussed and determined that this was the best deal we could get. And Mr. Howard, if you'd like to comment, you were part of those negotiations. We can't hear you.
I had my request to speak in for a couple of reasons. So let me just address all of the concerns since that's the conversation that we're having. First and foremost, the conversation, I was a part of one negotiation conversation. The conversation was brought to my attention the day of, and that's to no disrespect to Mr. Shamlin, but there were conversations had prior to me being a part of the negotiation. So let's be very clear about board leadership having the opportunity to address these things. Secondly, when I was on that call, we discussed that there would be a range that we would offer up as a potential salary. When we get to today, that is not even the salary that we're talking about. So to say that I had such an integral part in this discussion is a gross misconduct. I had conversations with Mr. Shamlin about my concerns, and he assured me that those concerns would be addressed when the continued negotiations happened, because I was not available with the last minute notice of the discussions that were happening with this contract. Secondly, I think it's a gross misconduct of leadership, Mr. Gode, to attack Ms. Ware Jackson for expressing her concerns around a contract when clearly all she asked was for us to do a better job, or if there are additional things that we can address as board leadership in the midst of this contract. So for you to come on here in this public meeting and tell us that we as a board can start the meeting without a superintendent, I think it's bull crap. Secondly, we are a board. We are going through a hell of a lot right now because of actions of this board. So to attack a board member for literally asking the questions, I think it's questionable of you as a leader. I think it's disrespectful to a Black woman. I think it's very disrespectful the way you just handled that situation, and it's a gross misconduct of your leadership. Thirdly, I'll just say that all we were asking in this negotiation of a contract is there still time to consider or get clarity around these items that are still concerns to our constituency? So for us to act like we can't ask questions as board members is a bull crap yet again. That's our job. Our job is to hold each other accountable, board leadership accountable, and this entire board accountable. If we can't ask questions and if we're just supposed to be rubber stamps on this board, we can get the hell up off of it and go somewhere else. If we just supposed to rubber stamp everything and literally ask questions in a very dialoguing way as elected officials who represent diverse opinions and perspectives, what the hell are we here for? Why did our constituencies elect us to be a part of this board if we literally can't ask questions about a $500,000, a $250,000 contract that we're getting ready to go out? Like, there's no point in us being here. Just rubber stamp it, let us sign off on it, and then we can go home.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I will like the record to note that you were invited to all of the meetings, and the meetings were set up at the last minute because that's the way they were set up. I had no other knowledge or input before either. So that's the way it is. So any other comments from any other board members? I see none. I will go to the public and read the public comments that are listed.
Mr. Gode, I think Mr. Lannis is.
Mr. Lannis has a comment.
We will come back to Mr. Lannis. I already called the public comment.
Sir,
We will come back after the public comment. Yes, I did. So one of them is from Storm. We're gonna come back to you, Mr. Lannis. Don't worry. The word him is used twice rather than her. We've gotten that. The next one is not pertinent to this. The next one is from June Conti. I implore the board to center Baton Rouge's lowest performing schools in the district, the Innovation Network, when considering performance-based incentives in Mrs. Brown's contract. For far too long, the district has disregarded these students and focused solely on magnet schools. In order to pursue equity, we must prioritize Innovation Network schools at this time. We can do so by including incentives that directly target innovation schools. Next is from Maria Harmon. Is there a possibility to include a probationary period of 1 year for the incoming superintendent? The next is from Devin White. When the superintendent search began at the end of last year, the South Louisiana Coalition for Education conducted a community survey to surface the most salient issues to be addressed by the next leader. One of those issues was the underperforming schools in our district and the need to intentionally and urgently address them and begin to turn them around. As you consider the contract tonight, please also strongly consider performance metrics that include how the district's lowest performing schools show growth and progress. The superintendent should not be additionally awarded on top of an already loaded contract for maintaining status quo. This is only right. From Kurhanda Corley, due to COVID-19, our super will not go school to school or do much travel. Secondly, we can pay for the 24-hour cell phone, but insurance, card net, internet should come out of our own paycheck as it does for any other staff and children. We should not pay for someone to live better than the demographics in which we serve. Also, we should include in the contract a probationary time frame, matching a percentage of funds she put in retirement, not just hand her one, performance requirements, and what's really required for her to do regarding special populations, failing schools, etc. We should have learned from Drake's contract, not repeat the problematic trajectory that helped get us to where we are in a bottomless pit. We should give her the basics until we see a reason to give her perks. She has never been a super and should be as an entry-level super. We should never give a contract as vague as this one. Legally, this contract is horrible and allotted time frame something. From Storm Matthews, under the termination portion of the contract, now section C, I would like to see just cause added to the contract, regardless of how many days notice is given termination of the contract, shouldn't be willy-nilly. I will refresh. And one more, this from Jasmine Pogue. This contract needs more dialogue. There was not adequate time for the public to comment and digest this information. There should be a racial equity aspect of the superintendent contract tied to performance. That is the end of the public comment. We'll go back to Mr. Lannis. You now have the floor.
I'm sorry, but I think I would be remiss if I allowed this opportunity to pass by without us further addressing the fact that we're disrespecting board members. And the fact that it's just being simply glanced over, that is completely out of order. I think that is a discussion that needs to happen. We could talk about the contract all night. I mean, there's a lot to discuss in terms of the contract, but we can't move forward as a board if we're going to be disrespecting each other. And if I'm going to be on this board, I'm telling you now, I will not stand for it. I absolutely will not stand for someone in board leadership disrespecting other board members. Because the public is watching this, and I want the public to also understand this is how business is conducted, which is why we need full transparency whenever we're having these types of conversations surrounding a superintendent's contract and what goes inside of it. It simply should not be just board leadership, because none of the other board members, I know I didn't. I knew nothing about the contract negotiations, which it should have came to the board anyway before we had to talk about this in front of the entire general public. I'll stop right there. But I do think that Mr. Goday, President Goday, you need to address the disrespect that has been shown to other board members in that comment that you made.
Thank you. Are there any other board comments? Seeing none, Ms. Ware Jackson, are you trying to comment? You're on mute, so I cannot hear you. You have nothing to say. So no comments remaining from the board. We'll now move to the vote to approve the contract. Madam Secretary?
Please vote.
I don't see a pop-up. Do I need to be?
Click on the item itself, click on number 1.
Oh, I did. Nope.
Madam Secretary, do you have the votes?
I'm still waiting on 2. Ms. Ware Jackson and Ms. Dyson.
Is it in board docs?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, no wonder. I'm sorry. I don't have board docs pulled up. Let me pull it up. Darn it. I'll just take mine verbally.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that. We're gonna do them verbally anyway, so I will start with the roll call. Mr. Blue,
Yes.
Mr. Lannis,
No.
Mr. Howard,
No.
Ms. Collins,
Yay.
Ms. Ware Jackson,
No.
Ms. Dyson,
Yes.
Mr. Gode,
Yes.
Ms. Bernard,
Yes.
Mr. Tatman.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is the announcement of meetings. As soon as I can pull it up. Special meeting for charter applications will be held on July 9th, 2020 at 4 p.m. Excuse me for a second. I have grandkids
Life
here.
happens.
I have grandkids here. My apologies. Special
Sorry.
meeting will be held July 9th, 2020 at 4 p.m. in the Professional Development Center at 300 North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. And all of these meetings we're announcing at the PDC is subject to possible virtual meetings dependent on the COVID-19 situation. Board workshop for the 2020-2021 budget to be held on July 9th, 2020, immediately following the special meeting at the Professional Development Center, 300 North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. Committee of the whole meeting to be held on July 9th, 2020, immediately following the board workshop on the budget at the Professional Development Center. The Lehigh Renaming Committee / Public Forum will be held on July 13th, 2020 at 6 p.m. at the Professional Development Center, 300 North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. And the regular board meeting will be held on July 16th, 2020 at 5 p.m. at the Professional Development Center, 300 North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. There being no other business, this meeting is adjourned.
Ms. Dyson had a comment.
I'm sorry, Ms. Dyson, I didn't see a thing. Ms. Dyson, go ahead.
I just wanted to take a point of personal privilege to, because the meeting ended kind of abruptly last time, to say that I too am welcoming our incoming superintendent, and I look forward to the work of our new superintendent with our board in collaboration, and believe that we can get a long way towards our goals. So thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you.
Mrs. Brown.
Right.
We're looking forward to working with her.
Any other comments? The meeting is adjourned.